All right, welcome back, friends, to another edition of Famous Last Words, hosted by Pyrotecnico. We're going to have an awesome show for y'all tonight. We've got two very special guests. Tonight's show is called Tales from the Road with the Chainsmokers. And with us this evening, we have Clancy Silver and Danilo Lewis. So Clancy is the tour manager for the Chainsmokers. Hey, Clancy, while Danilo is the band photographer. All right, welcome back, friends, to another edition of Famous Last Words, hosted by Pyrotecnico. Somebody's got to mute themselves there. We got a little echo. All right.
We dicked it. We're good.
We're good. Okay. So thank you, Clancy. And
That was on me. That was on me.
Thanks, Rocco, for that, and thank you, Clancy and Danilo, both for being here tonight. We really appreciate you taking the time to be here.
Cool. Sounds good.
So before we go any further, I'd love just to have the viewers hear a little bit of background from both of you about how you got involved with the industry and ultimately with the Chainsmokers. For the viewers, remember, this is an interactive conversation, so please write any questions or comments you have in the comment sections below, and we'll try to keep or get to as many questions as we possibly can. Danilo, maybe we can start with you. You can tell us a bit about your background and how you got involved with photography and with the industry in general.
Okay, so yeah, my name is Danilo Lewis. I'm a photographer based out of LA. I got started in the industry about 10 years ago, shooting small clubs, nightlife in DC with a very big promoter in DC by the name of Pete Muzzo. He's the guy who gave me my start back in the days. He's famous because he, developed this dance music scene in Washington, DC that just exploded over time. And he was way ahead of every trend, started opening a lot of different clubs, a lot of different venues. One of those being Echo Stage, which was my home venue for about 4 years. Echo Stage is famous because it's the #1 concert venue in the US, voted by, I believe it's like DJ Mag or whatever it's called. And that's where I kind of got my education into the world of music photography, concert photography, DJ photography, all of that. That's where I ultimately, met Drew and Alex from the Chainsmokers and their entire team, which led to, a long relationship now where we stand now almost 5.5 years almost now, that we've been trekking along, doing all of this.
Very cool. And Clancy, maybe you can just give our viewers a bit of the same, just a little brief background of kind of how you ended up where you did.
My history is kind of confusing and long, but I used to work in film. I got bored. I got hired by some friends of mine that had a booking agency that had a bunch of DJs. Went to work for them, started at the bottom. Then I really like saying yes to things I've never done before. So they're like, hey, you want to try tour managing this French band? Sure, did that. And then just kind of jumped from bigger DJ, bigger band, bigger DJ, bigger band. And then I started getting clients outside of the agency that I was working for. I got approached by CAA, who was dealing with Chainsmokers at the time, to do a bus tour for them. They'd never done one before. And I was their first employee. And 5 years later, I've been with them the whole time. I've been the tour manager, the production manager, the babysitter, the security, the therapist, the shoulder to cry on, and everything in between.
Yeah, you wear many hats as a tour manager, which I think we're going to get into some of those stories. So, no, that's perfect. I really appreciate that, Clancy. Before I think we dive any deeper, I'm going to pass the mic over here to Rocco because he's actually been on the road with you and worked with you for the past several years. So he's got some great tales to tell from the road as well and some awesome stories. So Rocco, I'll let you take it away.
Thanks, Jeff. Yeah, I mean, it's been an amazing experience. Clancy, I think the first time you and I did this was at Lollapalooza maybe 5 years ago or something like that, and at Perry's stage, and it kind of all started there. And we've been working with you guys for a long time, and we're just incredibly grateful for the time we've had together and what we've done together. I think one of the areas that you didn't mention in your day-to-day duties was you have a heavy influence and on the special effects that the guys do, and that's that's something that we've worked on, but you that's a big part of what you do. And I thought, we could start off by, talking about the last tour, which was World War Joy, and kind of how we came up with all that and where it started and so forth. And I would just say, you know, and I'll turn it over to you on how we got to the songs and so forth. My memories of when we were at rehearsals, the first thing we did was when, you know, that the icons, the floating, you know, icons that were in that were so amazing, but they created a challenge for us at the beginning when we were walking that stage for a day, just moving stuff in place and placing things, because as opposed to a regular stage where it was clear, you know, this show had these amazing pieces that basically floated into place. And on one side of the stage, we could do things, and on the other side, we couldn't. And
we couldn't do it symmetrically, at least.
Couldn't do it symmetrically. So we were literally taking flame heads and moving them all around the stage because we like to use the wave flames, and came up with something great. So I'd love to hear about how, you know, in addition to that process we went through, when even before World War Joy, is that a collaboration with, you know, you and the guys on what you think pyro songs work well and what special effects go where? And love to hear about how that comes together.
You know, dance music has been, you know, catering with the glitz and glam for a long time now. And when we started doing this tour and started building this tour, Matt McGuire, who's our drummer and our MD and basically our in-house creative, worked with Production Club, who's a company that was our production designer on the tour, to really like whittle down our pyro to key moments instead of making it all about, you know, the special effects and the wow visually. You know, the tour was really band heavy, whereas historically, you know, Chainsmokers had been a DJ act, and then over the last few years, they've, you know, evolved into a band. They didn't just want to do what we would normally do in a DJ set and bang out, you know, cryo on this song and pyro on this song, and every drop gets something. So, you know, between the band, Matt and Production Club and myself, we kind of whittled it down to like the key moments, the key songs that people would expect, you know, a big visual moment for something crazy to happen on the stage. You know, the show about a year and a half ago or 2 years ago with Ultra, we started opening our show with the guys holding flares. And, you know, that's kind of been this kind of seminal look and as to how they've started their shows for the last, you know, couple of years now. So that was going to stay. Obviously the big records needed, you know, their big hits of pyro. And when we set out, it was like, you know, man, we want to do pyro in depth. You know, everybody does it right along the downstage edge. How do we do something a little different? And then exactly like you said, it was like we had this, you know, scenic hanging in the air that really screwed us on trim heights and just physical placement in depth that created a problem. So we started adding, you know, other gags to it. You know, we used the strobing flares.
Which was great.
That you had helped us source. And, you know, we actually tried that the first time at Ultra last year, where we basically wrapped these cages in these strobing flares, which were really cool. We really wanted, it was like a really cool way to start the show. And you know, it just brought it brought the production to life in a way that lighting and video couldn't.
Yeah.
Really fit the mood of the show. You know, fire has always been big in our shows, especially with our drummer, who likes to light his sticks on fire. So, you know, that's always a big moment. You know, the dude drumming with flames kind of all around him. And then we've always kind of surrounded him in fire. Anytime, you know, we've done a big show that he's doing that solo, you know, whether it was Ultra, we surrounded him in hurricanes. On this show, we surrounded them with G flames, just based on, you know, what we could fit on the thrust and what was safe and approved from a fire marshal standpoint, because we had the thrust running through the arena, and we would have loved to have put, you know, flame units all over the place, but, you know,
right.
We're doing clearance to crowd and whatnot. We also put flames in the roof, which was something we hadn't done before on an arena tour. Which was cool. It has its own challenges. Definitely would have loved to use bigger flames in the roof, but, you know, it's spitting isopar down on the crowd, probably not the move.
Right.
From a compliance level. You know, the mortars were always like a fun way to either, you know, hit a big moment of a song, a way to go to blackout, end the show. We loved playing with those in our show. You know, and then dealing with your normal comments and minds, you know, color wise, playing into the style guide of the show and what, you know, the creative direction team has put together as far as what colors and what moods work with what songs, you know, and working with you guys to find the right colors and the right product to suit the right moment. And then you bring up the waves, which we obviously love, you know, all flames everywhere can go straight up and down, but the fact that we have flames that can go like this now is a really cool and interesting way to play with them. If they're done tastefully, I guess they can get overdone, I'm sure. But you know, we place them strategically throughout the stage so that, you know, some moments we would have them only downstage, sometimes we'd have them upstage, sometimes we'd have them up behind the drummer, and all kind of doing different things. Yeah, I don't know. It was a really cool show, and a really
Yeah.
I thought it was an interesting way that we played with some of what we've normally used and played with it a little bit differently on this tour.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, you know, another thing that, you know, in addition to like with the scenic pieces and all the automation, right, that was right there, you know, we were faced with when they landed and where they went. But there was another thing is that the film that they were wrapped in was so specialized that as soon as I walked in the door
And
the
really
first day,
expensive.
everyone was like, you cannot burn the film. There's no more of it. And we were like, so we were not only having to face challenges of where to put stuff, but we couldn't have anything get near this stuff because we didn't know how it was going to react. And I remember because there was such little pieces of it, when they were cutting into it for the span sets, essentially, we were going and grabbing little pieces off the deck to take them outside to hit them with lighters to see what would happen to it. So
yeah, I remember that was that 3M dichroic film.
Yeah,
The
right.
only people that had it was like us and an Apple store.
And an Apple store
had like bought out all of the dichroic film that Production Club had found for us. And yeah, I remember that was a big challenge, especially when we went into buildings that had a low trim height. You know, the production management was just like, okay, you can't use the upstage flames today. And we're like, come on. So then then RJ, who was the tech on the tour with us from Pyrotecnico, you know, we'd start playing with angles and figuring out how we could do stuff, because they were like key moments in a show. And it's tough when you build a tour, you know, because a lot of the buildings are so different and have their own challenges with rigging and, you know, you're posed with different trim heights. You want to be able to do, you know, this production design that you've paid for and you've really excited about, and you want to be able to do it everywhere, as well as all of the effects that went along with the show. And then sometimes you come into these rooms and you're like, shit, you can't do it.
Yeah.
Or you can't do it the way you'd want to do it in the building. So you've got to be able to adapt. It's like, you know, I've been through this gamut with you know, with certain flame types are not allowed in Canada or not allowed in this building, or the fire marshal's iffy about this fluid, or, you know, a sporting team ruined something for all of us, you know? So, you know, it's an interesting game, but it's fun to be able to play with it in different ways and like work with a vendor that, you know, plays with you to come up with a really cool show.
Yeah. I mean, I appreciate that. And I remember, speaking of flames, and Paul, this, you know, your thing's near and dear to you. The tour went through a city in the United States that had it, you know, that they had an incident with flames at an NFL game, and the tour came in right afterwards, and it was like, yeah, we're just not gonna let you use any flames on this show. And it was like, yeah, that's probably not gonna work for these guys. They have like 40 flame units on this show. It's a pretty big part of the show, and we were able to get through the dynamics of it. But, you know, just at the level that, you know, that image that was just up, Brian, I don't know if you put that up, just to have, you know, Matt, who's just basically encased in it with you know, with his sticks, creates really special moments. I guess that's a good segue into you to know, it's like, so, you know, you capturing that, like, walk us through that. Like, you know, how are you learning the show, I guess, is a question I would ask you from the beginning and the outset, so you know where to be, because you have to document it from essentially day one when it's on the road.
Yeah, so for me, I legit, any chance I get, I pester Matt about any and every detail possible of what's coming during the show ahead of time. We're talking like months. Like, you know, most people don't know, but him and I talk so much about how the show is being, like, he tells me how the show is going to be built, you know, what I should be expecting, the things I should be prepared for. And this was one of those moments that you know, we had done, you know, obviously like his fire drum solo so many times, and he kept telling me, it was like, wait till the tour, wait till the tour. Like, we are gonna step this up like times 20. And I wanted him to give me like every detail possible in that moment, but obviously like he was holding back a little bit. Once he was able to tell me everything, like him and I sat down, we talked about it. He showed me like the drawings, he showed me like what to expect. But obviously like one thing is seeing it like on paper, and then another thing is actually seeing it live. And I remember the first time, which during rehearsals when the first fires were like came off, in my head I was like, you know, just my eyes were just went crazy big, where it's like, okay, you did say you were gonna wrap yourself in fire. Like, this is you wrapping yourself in fire. Like, it just looks so insane and crazy. And it was one of the things that for me, like talking with him so much about it and listening to his view of what he wanted that moment to look like, and you know, during the show as far as photos, is he wanted, like he said, like he wanted to look like he was surrounded by fire. So every show I tried to like find different angles and navigate through the venue so it could look like he legit was in between flames, and the flames were just surrounding him. And it became like he would spot me when I would come in certain areas of the pit. And like him and I have this thing where he, like, if I look at him, he just goes crazy. Like he just, you know, if you've seen this Chainsmokers show live, you know, Matt is a savage monster when it comes to drumming. But then the thing, like when I come around, that he just goes even 10 times crazy than he normally is. And it's like one of my favorite moments during the tour to capture.
Yeah.
You know, the interesting thing about, you know, the way that we've used flames and pyro in our show is, and I'm going to toot my own horn here, because technically I pushed more buttons than any other tech on this whole tour, because we had so much automation, that everybody just kind of hit go on our arena show and like had an espresso at front of house. Maybe our audio guy was doing a little bit of work, but everybody else was chilling. But with me, it's like I'm dealing with shit that blows up, that can burn people, that can hurt people, and that can go south really, really badly. Especially we had a moment in the show where we would invite an audience member up to dance on the stage, and we were running flames behind them. And pyro was, you know, with me firing the pyro, it's like one thing that I can't just have it automated. You know, there's a lot of big shows that run all of their pyrotechnics and flames on time code. And I didn't, because we just had too many moving pieces that if I had to negate a fixture because somebody was walking there, or a photographer that wasn't Danilo, that didn't know the show, that our guys had approved to shoot that show, happened to walk out on the stage, because that happens every once in a while. You know, I need to be able to negate certain fixtures while still maintaining, you know, the integrity of the effects for the show.
Yeah, I think, and then one thing that, like, you know, and also I think it plays into this, but like with the you guys and Drew and Alex and Matt and Production Club and you and the team, is those, like World War Joy, and there was a lot of it at the, you know, in the festival shows and so forth. You know, the guys just have this amazing ability that one moment is a song and Drew is singing, and there's like very orchestrated cues to those types of those songs, and then in 2 seconds later they're doing a DJ set and the place is just exploding, and there's this almost raw, you know, flame cues and CO2 and stuff that happens, that it's just dynamic. I always felt that one of the best things about those shows is that you guys seamlessly move those shows from like where there's songs to a DJ set and then back and forth, and it just works so well together. So you know, kudos to you guys for that.
You know, one of my favorite things that Clancy just said was, you know, looking out for like all the photographers that may not know the actual cue of when things are coming. There was one moment, one of our videographers, he wasn't at rehearsals or at the beginning of the tour, so he came like 2 weeks later, and he's capturing this one specific moment with Matt, and had this crazy 360 camera, and I saw him walking up the steps that are next to Matt, and I looked at him going up, I'm like, oh, he doesn't know, flames are coming. And I looked at Clancy, and Clancy's just staring at me, going like, "Get him out of there!" I'm like, I don't know what to do. Like in this moment, thankfully, like there was one moment I just stood there and took a photo where the flames happened, and he looked like he was just like, "Holy, like I am caught, not in the right place right now. Like this could have ended so badly." And thankfully, obviously, he was like staying where he was, and nothing happened. But
Yeah, in this show too, there was a ton of, there at one point of the show, like 5 Seconds of Summer came on, so there was a changeover that basically happened into him. There was a lot of activity going on that stage throughout. The Globe of Death came down, and Burtis was running out there. I mean, there was a lot of moving parts on this one, and it was just phenomenal.
It was cool. It was cool with the Globe of Death, and for those that are watching this that didn't know, like we had, that traditional carny act of this family from Florida, the Urias family, who are, crazy daredevil dirt bikers that would come in the middle of our concert and rip around in this globe. And they were cool with like the CO2 going off, the flames were going off all around this thing. They're coming down from the ceiling. They're kind of going around the ball, and the CO2 is going. And they didn't really bat an eye. So it was like a neat, addition to that section to like get people hyped who were already like, what the fuck? You have a carnival act in the middle of your concert.
I remember being at the building in San Bernardino when I saw that thing happen for the first time. Like, oh my God, this is fucking crazy. And I was like, it was so cool. And it was and I think at that point I learned that the Urias family and our team were riding on the same bus. And I think I said to you, you stuck all the carnies on the same bus.
What's that photo you guys are showing is I had taken that photo, I want to say, looking at the date, I mean, it was within it's actually the first like 2-3 weeks of the tour happening. And like halfway through the tour, Clancy kept telling me, was like, "Hey man, I need you to get this photo during the Global Death drop with the CO2. Is like, it's been designed, like I'm doing this and it looks incredible." Like he was just really hype about this, him wanting me to capture this photo. And I just looked at him, I was like, "Yeah, I already did that like 3 weeks ago." Like you haven't looked at the Dropbox. And like, this is like one of those photos that like, I knew exactly what he was talking about. Like the moment I saw it the first time, I was like, the symmetry of this, how it was built, it's just beautiful. So it just works.
Very cool. Yeah, it's amazing.
It's also worth mentioning, and for those that are interested in effects, it's like not all the effects work the same way everywhere. I learned that the first time I tried to do CO2 at Coachella, and I was like really excited about it, and I didn't know any different about humidity, like an idiot, and it kind of went out like somebody smoking a really shitty vape. You couldn't even really see it, and even on this tour, we put a lot of emphasis on the CO2 cues, and we had more bottles than we should have had, and then we would go to states that were really dry, and we'd actually have to look at the humidity, in advance going into certain markets and be like, how are we going to achieve that? You go into Colorado and you're a mile up in Denver, and you think you're going to get these really big fat plumes of cryo like you're going to get in Miami, and it's just not going to happen. Where was it where we brought in
Denver.
In those humidifiers. We brought in industrial humidifiers.
Denver.
To put underneath the stage to push warm air at the downstage edge to try and help our gas look good, because we were filming that show for it was a live stream or some content capture for some documentary, or I forget what it was, but it was like, this show has to have the best looking CO2 of the tour, and it couldn't have been a worse city to try and get good CO2.
Some of those phone calls were great.
Trying to do that.
Yeah. Well, those brainstorming phone calls we were having on that was just like, we were just.
Yeah, it's like, how do you get hot air in an arena with their AC shut off and like it's super dry? It's like, I know, like like industrial humidifiers, or like blowing, big fans at like pools of boiling water. I remember I trying to talk to you about like those old low fog basins that used to boil
right.
like the water and the dry ice, and basically try and use just those like heaters to boil water to push some humidity at the downstage edge. It was interesting.
Yeah, we mobilized like XL CO2 jets, and we're thinking through solutions as opposed to just dealing with it, which was great. Paul, do you want to take questions on this segment of talking about this tour? I don't know what's come through before we shift gears a little bit.
We can definitely jump into a question here or two, but nothing specific to the tour.
Okay.
Let me jump into one. One of the questions is working pyro on the fly. What was your biggest challenge you ever had?
Ooh. Not hurting anybody.
Don't forget the safety guy asking this question.
Yeah, no, that's what. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. You know, it's like, and I think we're going to go into this a little bit later, but you know, the tour on one side, you know, everything's pretty mapped out, and the things are going to happen at the same time. Obviously, we get these caveats with these guests. Sometimes we have feature artists that don't know what our cues are, but they're a big moment in the show where we have flames or we have whatever, and you know, feature X, Y, and Z that's only coming out to one tour date, you know, stepping in the wrong spot. You know, we're pretty good working with, you know, people spotting all of our tech crew, from our backline to our photographers. They all know the crew, and a lot of them are present, as well as, you know, the pyro vendors, spotters that tour with us. You know, they're pretty good about making sure people don't go in the right spot. But I mean, it goes back to what I was saying, because I do everything manual, it's easy for me to negate certain pieces of the puzzle that might not, you know, be the full look that we wanted for that moment, but we still have it, you know, on one side or one layer in depth, or maybe I've shut off one unit. You know, the way that we programmed the MA to control that show, it was really easy for me to turn on and turn off fixtures as needed based on what the obstruction or issue was potentially going to be. You know, definitely had moments where I can't fire it, and then, you know, that's a whole other bit of acrimony after a show, talking to somebody about it. But you know, sometimes it's unavoidable, and sometimes you have, I don't know, you know, if we're in a festival setting or whatever, you got all sorts of
totally different.
You got all sorts of elements that you just can't even anticipate, and you got to make a call. If you can fire, you can't fire. I mean, you know, safety is paramount. And yeah,
I would say, for, you know, the folks watching, the one thing, you know, about the tour setting is, you know, everybody saw the show run like 4 times before anybody else saw it. So there's that time where, you know, you do it in rehearsals and you see it and everyone gets acclimated to it. And then we did it the night before the first show in Cincinnati in the first venue. So everyone has seen it happen 3 or 4 times already before that it actually, the audience gets to see it. You know, I think that's a good segue into the next question I had, is like the one, you know, you have the tour setting, and then there's the festival setting. And then, you know, there have been times where we have worked together in the US, or where you guys do runs in Europe that are crazy. I remember, like, Elliot, I think, told me the one run you guys did, you did 3 shows in like 3 countries in 3 days, or 1 day or something, and you kept going back in time and it was just, you know,
we've definitely done 3 shows in 1 day before. Really crazy and stupid, but we're used to a schedule of, like, you know, 10 shows in 11 days in 9 countries. It's kind of how it goes.
So if you're in those environments and you're jumping from festival to festival, and say you do 10 shows in 11 days or whatever, I'd have to imagine, you know, if you're going from city to city, you could be likely dealing with 3 different or 4 different or 10 different pyro vendors. You know, what challenges does that create for you? I'm really interested to hear, especially when, you know, you have this 3 shows in 1 day and you're doing with 3 different shows, essentially, with 3 different vendors, because they might all be different. I'd love to hear about, like, what challenges you face there in those environments.
You know, advancing it is the challenge. You know, it's like, how do you, because a lot of the times we're not, you know, typically different from like a traditional band. It's like as a DJ act or a festival act, you know, that's sometimes a band, sometimes we're a hybrid, not a full band, just DJ set plus the drummer. Sometimes we're a DJ set, sometimes we're in Vegas. You know, we're kind of all over the place in different kinds of shows that all have different, you know, requests from the guys as far as like what effects we want to use. And then, you know, being able to, sorry about that, being able to, advance that correctly and keep on top of all those details. I mean, a lot of the times when we're in different cities, we're in different countries, we're with all different vendors that have all different products, that have all different units. Our rider requests a certain type of flame unit, can't get it everywhere. Our rider has requests for certain types of pyro, or certain comets or certain mines or concussion or whatever. It's not available everywhere, or it's not permittable everywhere. So we kind of go on the fly. A lot of the time too, the consoles are different. I like to fire an MA, but sometimes I'll get a Cobra, and sometimes I'll have the Wave. What's the Explo unit?
The Explo, yeah.
And I did a show in Vietnam, and it was like a homemade, nail board power strip with just on-off stuff, and they were firing monstrous shells out of the barricade. So here's the deal. The good thing is that the guys, the artists are pretty understanding when we're in the middle of nowhere in some crazy country in the middle of a crazy run. They're not picking at me that gerb cue came out as a comet, or like when you're in Japan, for example, you're allowed in our show, which would normally have maybe like 23, 25 cues of pyro, you're allowed 10 pieces of pyro.
Right.
So
and out of those 23 cues, some of those cues have 60 pieces firing at one time.
Yeah, exactly. And so we've done shows in Tokyo, or Osaka, or elsewhere in the country, and you're allowed 10 total pieces of pyro. So it's like, all right, so do I want to fire a single gerb? No, not really. So I'll use it, I'll use it for like one hit on the intro, or I won't do it on the intro. I'll do it at the end, or I'll do it on a certain kind of moment halfway through, whatever makes the most sense. Other times, as we were talking about this the other day, I'll get a fireworks vendor that's not a stage pyro vendor, or I'll get like a mom and pop shop that does quinceañeras and doesn't get concert effects. And we just kind of got to work with them, like that one with you. We were on FaceTime and you were teaching me how to program
Fire digital
for my show when I was in Buenos Aires, because the vendor didn't know how to do it.
No, it was, we were literally on the phone. I was like saying, hit this key, hit this key, hit this key. What is it telling you now? What is it telling you? And we were literally going through it so this show would have happened, because if the way this script is what we call it with the firing cues would have been executed, it would have been, it wouldn't even have been like,
it would have fired the whole thing at the same time.
It would have been not like the guy's not being upset because a gerb and comet were intermixed. It would have been like the whole show happening at one time.
Yeah,
that would
exactly. Which has happened, which has happened before with like cues getting amalgamated, or, we had one show with a vendor that I won't name, but they loaded their duration gerbs upside down.
Nice.
And when I fired a single, like a half-second gerb, it only popped up off the ground about 6 inches, and the tech and I looked at each other, and I was like, that wasn't right. And he's like, no, that wasn't. And then I went for a 20-second duration gerb, and
you burned holes in the stage.
It burned through the stage.
Yeah.
And basically lit the whole front of the stage on fire, and other pieces of product started going. We had to run out in the middle of the show with fire extinguishers and, shut down the pyro. I've had other ones where they've used shell, we're in countries whose permitting and safety standards are totally different, and they're using like monstrous firework shells, as stage pyro, that are going up and coming straight down into the crowd, and they're like, yeah, it looks awesome, and I'm like, nah, I don't need that liability. The interesting thing too is like, when we travel, we can do different things in different places. I've been hoping you guys would be able to do it, but I guess in the States we can't do it. In Europe they can do line rockets, and we can you fire these basically sparklers across, the roof, and they look sick, but you can't do them here because somebody ruined that for us a long time ago. Before I was doing it. The other thing, they angle their flames, and they angle their pyro over the crowd. Whereas here, traditionally it's got to be straight up. There we can fire it at an angle. And yeah, and it looks
That,
rad. I don't know how
so,
safe it is, but it looks sick.
so I remember this. This was like in like what, Serbia? Yeah, there was Serbia. And I was like, I don't know, sitting looking at my phone, and I was on Instagram, and I don't know if it was you or somebody had posted this, like these comets that were just like at a 45-degree angle ripping out over the stage. I think I texted you. I was like, what in the world is that? And it was like, yeah, it was insane. And the dynamic of what you see in places from, you know, country to country is pretty crazy what you see, that, you know, some of the safety stuff that you see. And it's
You
happy
can
we
see
don't
that
do it
what
here.
you're talking about. You can see better in that other image with just the single one, because the tech, you know, this is the other challenge. It's like I'll send a cue sheet, and like I'm really well versed in how to explain to somebody on how to program, you know, my cues and how they need to be sequenced and whatever. But this guy was using a Cobra, which is, you know, not quite as versatile as what I would normally use with the Pyro Digital or whatever. And he programmed the cues as individual pieces. So these like monstrous shells, you know, this was like, you know, this major moment that was going to be this big comet look or this big mine look, and it fired one single, you know, monstrous shell. And you can't really tell from here, but way back in the distance, front of house was elevated here, and these shells
Right there, yeah.
must have been some like leftover Cold War, you know, pieces of artillery, because they literally buzzed our boys at front of house.
Wow.
So that I heard about it on comm for the whole show. So
Nice.
yeah, you don't know what you're gonna get.
Yeah.
You know, you get guys that are like, yeah, no problem, and it's just not, you know, what's supposed to happen. And then, you know, and sometimes there's a huge language barrier depending on where we are, and we just kind of roll with it. You know, you deal with it the way you got to deal with it and move on to the next show. I mean, we do 180 plus shows a year. You know, the guys aren't going to remember that one show,
Right.
you know, where the gerb was a comet, or it was 1 instead of 8 or whatever. What they do remember is, you know, God forbid you do something really, really wrong, and something may have been unsafe. So that's, you know, a priority for us. Wherever somewhere that doesn't feel safe, or the product that we've advanced is not the product that's there, and the product that's actually there is something that's really not cool. Like if it goes into the crowd, and regardless if they're stoked on it and the fans are still raging, it's like I wouldn't want to catch a heater to the face if I was a fan of the Chainsmokers show. And so
No, because,
you know, I kind of just pull the plug, you know, on effects that, you know, internally we don't seem as okay.
yeah, because I mean, it's going to be your guys' name associated to it in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
So,
Actually,
Danilo,
I was front of house during when the first pyros were coming into that front of house section in Serbia, and I remember seeing the first one just kind of just go by me, and I looked at Josh, who's I usually stand right next to Josh if I'm in front of house, because he has like the perfect dead center.
That's our LD.
Look. Yeah, he's our lighting director for the show. And when that happened, I looked at him. I was like, all right, that's good enough for me. I'm good to go. You guys have a good show. I'm going back on stage.
So my question for you is, like, you know, understanding that when you're doing multiple shows, the two questions that I would have for you is, are you just going with it when you get there, kind of seeing what the stage looks like and just kind of going with it? And from a content or from a photography standpoint? And then secondly, in the world we live in, content, I'm sure you want to get it out as quickly as possible. How does that processing time, I mean, is it right after the show you're editing and getting stuff? How does that all work?
So for the first one, like the two most important things for me when we get to a venue, especially like, you know, festivals, which is a venue it's a brand new venue. I don't know what it looks like, and I only have a specific amount of time to really go, is, you know, I put my bags down and I go straight to the stage to see two things. One, what's the quickest way from stage to front of house? Like, how long is that going to take me to get to? You know, because like I have to walk around to the entire venue of that festival. So, you know, I have to map out my times, because we're only there for, like, you know, depending on the festival, anywhere between an hour to an hour and 45 minutes, you know. So I don't have that much time. So I got to map everything out. So that for me is like the number one thing I do when we get to a venue is go see the stage, go see how big it is, how it's set up, and then start mapping out timing for me as far as like how long it takes for me to get from point A to point B and back. Like that's one of the biggest key things.
Interesting.
Yeah. As far as the content, like I always say, like, I don't think anyone puts out content as fast as, you know, our team does. Like we crank out photos, videos. Like, I mean, I have photos ready right after the show. Within an hour and a half of the show ending, I will have a full anywhere between 60 to 100 photos ready to go.
Oh,
You know,
wow.
and we're prepping, you know, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter posts right away because it's fresh. You know, you want that.
Yeah.
Like you don't want it to, you know, post it the next day, but the next day we're at a different festival. It doesn't make sense anymore. You know.
Yeah.
And even like I've always never understood how our video guys do it. Like it's one thing to do photos. There's another thing to crank out like actual video recaps within days of something happening like that quick. Like we had one of our guys, Jeremiah, we did one tour in Asia, and I believe he did one video per day for 7 days straight. And I to this day, I still don't know how. I don't
Wow.
know how that was possible, but I mean, it's yeah, like I said, like I don't think there's any teams out there that kind of rival what we do as far as how quick we get the work. And for us, it's not just like putting out quick work, but you know, we're trying to make sure that everything that we put out is the best quality possible for Drew and Alex. You know, so like you know, it's a little tough at times depending, you know, how we're moving and when we're moving. You know, there's countless times I'm editing in vans. You know, when we get to a plane, the first thing I do is my laptop comes out and it's, you know, trying to do everything as fast as possible before we land somewhere, you know, because by the time we land is when we're getting signal back. So post has to go up by the time we land.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah.
Very cool. And I guess to kind of come off of that, something that is interesting to me is, you know, your role from a photography standpoint isn't just to document the show, but like you document the day and everything. And, you know, how does that, you know, it's like, you know, morning to night almost, it seems like that's part of your responsibilities. Could you give us some insight on how that, you know, what that looks like?
Yeah. So, you know, everything just like, you know, we talked about like arriving to a new venue and trying to map out time. For me is mapping out the times during the day, you know, like especially long tours, like 3 months, 3.5 months. It's the same day every single day. You know, the venues, you know, the stage, all the venues pretty much like 98% of them all look the same. You know, the scenery won't change, but it's a matter of, for me, is how do I keep them, I don't want, for lack of a better term, entertained with content. You know, there's a lot of times where, you know, they have a lot of stuff going on. You know, they're doing interviews, radio interviews, meet and greets, and, you know, all that time is taxing. You know, there's a lot of times the last thing they want to hear is me dragging them out of the green room once again, just to do photos. So sometimes I have to just play around with what's available to me at that time. You know, I try to be very mindful of their time as well. You know, I try not to, you know, do too many things that are close to certain specific times during the day where they're going to be busy, you know, especially like even after they're busy, you know, I'll give them their time to just sort of relax and decompress. And I'll throw ideas from, you know, here and there throughout the day. And, you know, Drew and Alex and myself will discuss it, like if it's something they want to do or something they don't want to do. And, you know, a lot of the time is, I mean, I've been with them for so long now that, you know, they trust a lot of the silly ideas that I may have. You know, sometimes I'll throw something out there and they'll just go, yeah, cool, let's do it. It'll work. And,
oh, cool.
And it's like sometimes the most unexpected ideas become like a bigger post than you know, than we expected. So yeah, for me, it's just mapping out the day to ensure that, you know, I'm not adding stress to their day. Like for me, there are times that it's great to be in their face. You know, they're very good at allowing me to be all around where they're at. But there are other times that, you know, you have to read the room and realize, you know what, it's better to not be right up front, be a little bit fly on the wall, step back, like other moments. You know, there was tons of times where like people were coming in the room to present things to them or do like some a live feed for a video game or something like that, where it's like, it takes time away from like their downtime, it's added on things to the tour. And for me, it's like, all right, this is where I step back and let them just go through that moment, get through it. And this is where we can get back to our regular day to day, So, yeah.
Cool. I'm gonna add into other of Danilo's duties is I've basically, because he's like, I would call him effectively our lead photographer because he's on the majority of our shows, and he was on the entire tour with us, that I've basically made it his job to vet and discuss, any other photographers that asked to shoot the show. If we're at a festival, is like, hey, can we have our content team come up and shoot the show? I'm like, go talk to Danilo. And I just point everything photography and videography for that matter. Anybody new that's coming onto the stage, that's looking from a content perspective, I send them all to him, whether it's a festival or media or, another band's photographer that might be on support with us. They all discuss that with Danilo. That's one task that I add to him. And the other thing is he becomes sometimes the after party tour manager, because for 5 years, I've pretty much done every show after party, after party, after party. And I'm still the first one up and the last one to bed. And sometimes I don't want to go. In which case I turn to Danilo and I say, you're going to the after party. And there was one instance that I
knew was coming.
he had this moment in Montreal, and he lost one of the guys. And he came back to the venue like hoping I wasn't awake and hoping that the artist was there, because I basically had left my artists in charge with him in charge, and he showed back up with one of them. And the other was MIA, had gotten in the cab with someone, and we're somewhere, and we're in some strange city. And, the next day he came into my office and he said to me, he's like, I just want to say I'm sorry for any time I gave you shit for being a hard ass, because I get it now.
Yeah. Never doing it ever again.
I was very good.
I was like, hurting cattle.
I was like, how do I explain that I lost the artist?
That's amazing. Well, I think we wanted to end this with two things. We wanted to actually see some of everyone's handiwork, essentially. So, Brian, I know we'll go through some pictures, and then we'll end with some Q&A. So, you want to pull those up, and then we can, you guys can talk about what we're seeing and what show and so forth.
Oh, I love this photo.
Yeah, this was what, Clancy, when you talked earlier, the iconic opening of the show with the flares. That's that right there.
Which is also easier said than done, because it needs to be a 60-second flare, and those aren't available everywhere. And then the way, you guys designed us basically a baton that the Pyro product that we know of already that works and whatever, goes onto that baton, and we can hit go on that igniter. And as we see in this one, we were in Australia, right, Danilo?
Yeah, this is Australia.
Yeah, and this is another vendor in Australia who basically tried to mimic what we had that we didn't bring with us. And it's basically a wooden stick that has a little box, an engineer would know the terminology better than I do, that takes, the wires, the plus and minus or whatever from the Pyro product, and it's really janky, like homemade DIY version of what we normally use on our show. But it's got to get done somehow because it was a big part of the show. So,
and that kind of evolved. I mean, it started out as flares, and I was like, we got to stop doing this. We got to figure out a better way.
Yeah,
I've loved all the different iterations of the flares that have come through. You see the ones we used in World War II. I was like, all right, like these are it. I remember there was one that there was a button and the flame came out, and it just looked like a Vic lighter, like one of those like little lighters that just came up. I was like, oh, that one won't work.
Lollapalooza last year, we did the fire marshal demo, and for some reason this flare was like,
the one that wouldn't go out?
It wouldn't go out. I was just kind of looking at Clancy like, is this thing going to go out? And it's like, we were just sitting there talking to the fire marshal, and he was like, oh, that thing's fine. We're like, yeah, And we were just sitting there looking at it. Like, is this thing ever going to go out? And it was just kept burning. So
Yeah, because we were using like proper flares that like aren't meant to go out. They're like distress flares before we actually used a piece of pyro product to do it.
That was a piece of pyro product that we got. It just burnt forever. I don't know what was going on there. Our vendor, I don't know why it was made like that, but lasers, we haven't talked about those yet.
True.
Oh, I love lasers.
So let me ask you something. Like, are you flying to the back of the venue and just getting, how's that? I mean, to go from the stage to all the way back there, how does that come together?
So,
you have all that gear on too.
So here's the thing. So, I talked about earlier about, how I map out what I'm going to do, like how long it takes me. During sound check, or even like when we first get to the venue, I will time how long it takes me. Like I'll be on stage and then I'll go to the top of the venue and time how long that takes me, walking, just a normal walk, like no running. Cause obviously I can't run with all my gear. And obviously, I know the show, I know exactly what's coming and when. So I will time, but depending on what day of the show it is, like I'll say, today I'm gonna hit like a big laser shot like this, like this shot, like this specific moment, I have it from so many different angles. So I just pick and choose what day I will use, certain specific.
Gotcha.
This one, like this arena in Tampa was so big and it was crazy packed, and I had like a straight, like it's very rare that I have an open, unobstructed, dead center view of the arena, like from way back of the house. And this one had it, like as you can tell, like there's the stairs are dead center in the arena. So I just stood dead center of that arena, and that's where this shot came from.
Very cool.
But yeah, like for me is like, I know that that's going to take me, let's say, 8 to 9 minutes if I'm on stage to get this photo. So I know that if I want to get this photo, I need to be at the top by a specific amount of time. The problem sometimes happens is like, obviously during rehearsals or when we get to the venue, the arena is fully wide open.
Right.
So when the show's happening, there's a lot of areas when the show's on that they lock, especially the escalators don't work the same way that they did during a sound check. So that's like a little problem where like I panic. I'm just like, okay, I need to run somewhere else to finally get to the top. But this wasn't one of those cases.
Very cool. You got more, Brian, or you want us to move over to Q&A? Well, there we go. Oh, that was what we talked about earlier with the globe of death.
Come on, Brian. Pick a new photo.
Obviously likes that one.
Yeah, exactly. Paul, any questions, any comments we can?
Kind of goes in line with what you were just talking about, traversing through the stadium. Is that your biggest challenge, or the question actually is, was your biggest challenge for taking photos during this?
My biggest challenge during especially a tour like World War Joy, is making sure that the photos don't get tired. I have to make sure that every show looks different. I have to deliver different photos for every show. Otherwise, one of my biggest fears is for Drew and Alex to see photos and for them to go, okay, yeah, we've seen that. I want them to be excited every single time I deliver something. So I want them to see the photos from that show and think, oh, I haven't seen that yet. When does this happen? Like, cause obviously like they are aware of what the show looks like, but they don't get to see it from my point of view with the crowd and, like all the pyro, how it looks, how massive it looks. So for me, like, that's one of the biggest challenges, to make sure that every show looks different, or that I deliver different things for every show. Like there's the moments that, there's certain things that I call them, they're the must-haves, during every show. But there's also ways, I have to find different ways to show those moments. Those like especially peak moments of the show.
Very good. Here's a question. What is your favorite song? Who wants to answer that one?
For me, I love Sick Boy. I mean, there's so many that I love. I have Sick Boy tattooed on my arm. That's that's one thing. But it's like, I think like I love that song so much because I was in the room when Drew decided to start writing that song I didn't know what it was going to be. I didn't know what it was going to be called, and then being in the room when him and Tony, who was one of the piano players during another tour, were coming up with the melody, and then, sitting down through studio sessions of the lyrics coming together and the different iterations of the melody and the beats, that it's like you become attached. You're like, hey, like I enjoy seeing that entire process. And then when it's finally out, you're like, yeah, I was kind of, I was not a part of it, but being a part of it, just feel, you get attached to that. So I think that's like my favorite song for me.
Very cool.
I have the opposite experience of being attached to a song like that. I've heard the song so many fucking times. I do really like them, and I think they're incredibly talented. But, to Danilo's point about being there during the evolution of the song, the guys wrote Closer, which is arguably one of their biggest records, and one of the biggest records, in the last decade, for that matter, statistically speaking. And they wrote it in the back of a tour bus where my bunk was right against the back wall lounge. And I listened to the samples, and that play over and over and over again for 3 months on the road. And so I can't stand it. Yeah, I mean, sorry, I just needed to throw that in there.
No, but that's very cool that, being there at that moment that's very cool. So anything else, Paul?
Actually, most of the answer throughout the talk. You guys did an excellent job. We have a couple canned questions that we have come on through different channels. If we take 2 more questions, I guess. The biggest challenge orchestrating the entire tour would be?
That's for Clancy.
Yeah, it's definitely a Clancy question. Come on, dig deep.
Budget. Yeah, I mean, budget, the right crew, the right routing, which is, from our agent side of things, that plays in, that's a big part of it, how it goes and when it goes in the year and who's going to do it. And, so I'm, I guess, what you would consider the A-party tour manager. So I do all of the Chainsmokers touring, but when we do an arena tour, we'll bring in a tour director to help support and deal with all of the crew, because the band and myself fly out and do festivals or Vegas or TV or whatever during an arena tour, because we really don't take a break. And that's the other interesting thing, that the Chainsmokers doesn't tour like any other band. I mean, they're a DJ act, a festival act, a pop act. So we do arenas, we do festivals, we do Vegas and whatever. So when the roadies on our arena tour be like, oh, can't you wait to be done? It's like, what do you mean done? Because even we just did this, 41 city arena tour with World War Joy. The tour ended in Vancouver on the 6th of June. And then the 7th, we flew to Detroit, played, and then got on a jet and flew to Vegas, played, and ended in the morning in LA. So, that doesn't really answer the question. The biggest, there's a lot of challenges. That's like a whole other conversation. Leave that for the tour manager 101. Those guys
leave that for Mark Clark's board.
Spam their Facebook for that one.
Okay, to kind of go right into that, you said leave it for the 101. I'm going to ask you both a one-on-one question for folks that are looking to get involved in the business. What would you say to the younger folks out there? I see the no, and I agree with you in some respects. But what would you say would be the best thing for a young person wanting to get into the industry to do? Number one thing that has to get them set up to succeed.
Go ahead. Your answer is going to be a lot longer than mine.
I always say this. I always tell them the same answer, which is, the number one thing that it's challenging with content is how you evolve. You can't keep getting stuck with the same sort of looks and edits and the way you present your brand. There's a lot of photographers who will only do one. They all, all their work looks the same. It's very uniform. And that's great and all, but, times change, artists' tastes change. Before every tour, Drew and I will sit down and we will map out what kind of content we're going to create for that specific tour. There's many times like we'll sit, in our first conversations, he will go, what we did for this, like, I don't want to do that anymore. Like, we got to change it. We got to do something else. And I always say, like, like the hustle doesn't change. It just keeps evolving. And that's like one of the big key facts for me is like, if you really, especially in music and touring, if you want to have longevity, you have to be able to learn how to evolve every couple of months, be able to stay at top of all the trends, maybe even start a couple of trends, that's very hard to do in an artistic way. Cause there isn't really much original work out there, but work with your artists, work with your clients to, put out work that resonates not only with them, but with their fan, and be able to take, critique from not only yourself, but, talk with your client, talk with your artists, see what they want, how they like things. There are certain things that we were doing 2 years ago that I know Drew doesn't like now. There were things that we were doing last year that I know Alex doesn't like now. So we have to change how I have to change how I approach photography for them every single time, like in a different manner. So, yeah.
I would say to as a tour manager about photographers, the one thing I would say that, I mean, I've got a whole bunch of shit to say about that, but the one thing that I will say that is really important, and Danilo has always been very good at, is finding the right person to talk to make sure that they know that you're there to shoot for them, and do they want you there to shoot for them. Because I've seen Danilo, prior to him working, majorly with Chainsmokers, I've seen him at festivals and whatever, and he approaches the tour managers directly and be like, hey, I'm shooting for the festival. This is what I'd like to do. Let me know any of the caveats. Like, if people come to me and ask me that, I send them to Danilo. But, being able to speak with the band's infrastructure to find out what they're cool with, what they're definitely not cool with, because there's a lot of bands that are just not cool with a lot of stuff, especially from a safety standpoint. So, making sure that you're malleable and are cool if they say, no, I don't want you to shoot their show. And then about being a tour manager, just don't do it right now.
Right, yeah.
No, I mean, listen, I'm a project manager at heart. I happen to work in music touring, and that job is called a tour manager. And I kind of just fell into this gig, years ago, and I've stuck with it. So, I say yes to things that I don't know what the outcome's going to be, but I get turned on by being kind of frightened of an unknown based on a decision that I'm going to make. And, I definitely ask a lot of questions. I always ask a lot of questions. I've been doing this a lot less time than a lot of my peers and colleagues that I really respect, but I get respect for them because I ask a lot of questions. I don't really have an ego about it. And, collectively, I think I've probably done more shows in 5 years than a lot of people have done in their entire career. That's much longer than mine, but that doesn't change anything. I learn something new every day. I still have questions. I still have issues that I don't know how to deal with. Being able to be vulnerable and being open to get advice from someone that, to expose a vulnerability and be like, hey, I don't know how to do this. What do you think? It is a really important trait, because tour managers are problem solvers at the end of the day. We do logistics, and we run into all sorts of, crazy situations that we just have to figure out, because the buck is meant to stop with us. And sometimes I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. And I've got to, I've either got to think about it, or maybe I call a colleague that maybe has been through the same scenario and whatever. And I have no problem, asking for help and asking for advice. And I think that's just really important in anything, even for photography. I know Danilo gets stoked when people actually ask him questions about the stuff, because, he wants to be able to bestow, what he's learned to someone else. If somebody's not willing to pass on information to you, it's not a very fun relationship.
Yeah. Everybody has to leave behind something that's better than they got it in. It's the way you look at it.
If you're a touring photographer, go become friends with your tour manager, because they're gonna make the show, at least your touring life, much easier. People always ask me it's like, oh, how is it touring? Is it hard? I'm like, nope. I was like, I don't ever have to worry about anything. There has never been a time where I was just afraid of anything, scared that I didn't know anything. Nope, I know where I'm going, how I'm getting there, what time I'm getting there. And my favorite thing of all time is I get a pyro sheet or SFX sheet before every show that tells me what color, what time, when, and everything. That's my cheat sheet for the show.
Nice.
Yeah. So.
Well, cool. Well, I just say from, from our organization, we've been doing work with you guys for several years now, and we're appreciative of everything we've done for you, and the relationship that we've built and the shows that we've done together. And our entire organization takes a ton of pride in what we do with you guys. And, just thanks for that. And we're very appreciative. And
one last thing I always say, I put it on Instagram. I've done it so many, like thousands of times on Instagram, in a specific video or sometimes a specific photo, where I always say, it isn't a show until Clancy makes a mess out of the entire.
Right.
That's, for me, is my favorite thing. And
Nice.
it's just confetti's everywhere. There's CO2 flying everywhere. There's smoke the entire place. I'm like, yep, now it's a show.
That little confetti from World War Joy was everywhere. It was everywhere, that stuff.
Well, there was one that Clancy shot in Europe that I was not expecting. It was like tiny, tiny little particles of pyro that I was bathed in. Like snowman of pyro, of confetti.
Nice. All right, Jeff.
Thank you, Clancy. Thank you, Danilo. And thank you, everybody, for joining us. Keep your eyes out for the next episode. We'll make an announcement here shortly. And stay safe. We'll see you all next time. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us.
Peace. Thank you.